Welcome to the Great Detectives of Old Time Radio from Boise, Idaho. This is your host, Adam Graham. If you have a comment, email it to me, box13 at greatdetectives.net. Follow us on Twitter at Radio Detectives and check us out on Instagram, instagram.com/greatdetectives. Today's program is brought to you in part by the financial support of our listeners. You can support the show on a one-time basis using the Zelle app to box13 at greatdetectives.net. You can also become one of our ongoing Patreon supporters for as little as $2 per month at patreon.greatdetectives.net. And I want to go ahead and thank Roger for becoming our latest Patreon supporter at the Seamus level of $4 or more per month. Thank you so much for your support. Well, now it is time for this week's episode of Broadway's My Beat. The original air date is July 21st, 1949. There was a gap between last week's show and this week's, but it was just a preemption. There was no lost episode. And the title of this episode is The Otto Prokosh Murder Case.
Broadway's My Beat. From Times Square to Columbus Circle, the gaudiest, the most violent, the lonesomest mile in the world.
Broadway's My Beat, with Larry Thor as Detective Danny Clover.
Broadway, where night slips over the canyon streets like a black silk stocking splashed with spangles. Then it's a flashy showgirl on an after-theater date. But during the day it wears a sleazy house dress, no makeup on its face, and stands on a street corner screaming. Day or night, it wears any face you're looking for, and it's My Beat. The coolest place at police headquarters on a July afternoon is in the communications room, but it wasn't cool enough. Sergeant Tartaglia and I were taking turns standing under the fan. It was my turn. The sergeant walked over to a teletype machine, picked up the latest call sheet, came back. He was smiling.
Oh, this heat, Danny. It's rough on the police, but fine for the law and order.
The phone buzzer, Sergeant. Your number.
Yeah. Sergeant Tartaglia. Yeah. Yeah, where? Yeah, got it. What time? 1:12 p.m.? Yeah, right away.
What do you got, Sergeant?
It was too good to last. 30 call. Homicide. Be with you in a second, Danny.
Okay.
Commissioner, Sergeant Tartaglia. Reporting a homicide, sir. Dodge Theater on 46th Street, Vaudeville House. Yes, sir, a performer. Right. Sergeant Tartaglia speaking. Put this on the wires. Special to squad cars 19, 22, and 69. Special to homicide. Special to chief of detectives. To special detail. Hey, wait a minute. Now, that's you, Danny. Got it?
Dodge Theater, 30 call. Performer murdered, right?
Right. You squad car 47. See you.
Yeah.
Okay. Back to you. Special to Technical Research Laboratory. Special to coroner. To ballistics.
Your squad car stabs, tears, rips through a city, and its wail is like a piece of broken glass that slashes across its face. You can see the terror, silent and quick, in the blur of the city making way for you. It was maybe 1:25 when I hit the alley leading to the stage door of the Dodge Theater and twisted the car into it. It must have been a comedy act playing in front of the heavy and stained velvet curtain. The laughter and the music from the orchestra pit cut through from the front of the theater and washed against a wall of grim and blank faces backstage. Under the naked yellow glare of a single stage work light lay a man in a glittering sequin-covered suit of tights. He lay there like some muscular statue torn from its pedestal. But the web of blood told you it was a lie. The ballistics man, the medical examiner, the photographer, the fingerprint man, technical research, all worked and moved silently, weaving their way from shadow into light and back again. Then out of the shadows, a dapper little guy named Georgie walked over to me.
Danny, am I glad to see you?
Hi, Georgie.
How are you? These other guys, your colleagues, they're cold, very, very cold. But you're warm and friendly.
Yeah, it's a hot day, isn't it, Georgie?
Oh, you think so, Danny? I keep telling these guys in the front office, the air conditioning in this theater, oh, boy, it's a lie, a fable, an illusion.
Rough on a house manager, huh, Georgie? No air conditioning. Now, this...
You're so right, Danny. How will it look on the report when I tell the front office there was a murder act in the theater and I didn't even give it billing? Bad joke, huh, Danny?
You told me better ones. Now, tell me about the man, Georgie.
The, dead one?
The dead one. Who? What? Maybe why?
Who? He was an athlete from Vienna. He was an acrobat. His name was Prokosh, Otto Prokosh. And he was an athlete of muscle and steel. A filthy, rotten brain and a nice, clean body.
Well, that brings us to why.
I had a reason why. Do you want to hear my reason, Danny?
You lay yourself wide open that way, Georgie.
Doesn't matter. I don't believe in wasting time. This I understand from having once been an usher at the Roxy.
Shall I write it down?
If you want to. This dead Adonis, this murdered Achilles, there's filth called Otto, making tempting noises into the ears of my wife.
You don't have to answer this one if you don't want it, Georgie. Did she listen?
My wife, Ruth? That you'll have to ask her herself. You'll find her in dressing room 6 right up those stairs.
I'll ask her later. Now, tell me how it happened.
This I wouldn't know. I was in the front office counting the house, the way a manager should.
Oh?
Yes, Danny, yes. And you can check on it, too.
I will, Georgie.
Danny, you'll have to excuse me a minute. Say, has anybody seen Lee Emery come in? Has anybody seen Lee?
Hey, excuse me. Pardon me, will you? I work here. I gotta get on stage.
Sure, in a minute. Who are you?
Lee Emery, dancer. I dance for the people. What are you, an agent?
You're late, Emery. Georgie's over there looking for you.
Oh, what's he got to worry about? He's a manager. I'm a dancer. I'm never late.
The people are waiting for you, dancer. But stick around. I want to talk to you. I'm from the police.
But of course, there's been trouble.
Murder.
But of course I'll stick around.
Hey, Emery, get on stage. There's your music.
Okay, Georgie, okay.
Georgie, what was that dressing room number? 6?
6, Danny, 6.
Yeah, 6.
Yeah, what do you... No autographs, please.
I'm Danny Clover, police. Looking for Ruth Houston. Georgie said she'd be here.
Oh, Georgie always knows where Ruth is, doesn't he, Ruthie? He always knows. Except he finds it tough to keep up with a fast package like I.
Pay no attention to Shelley, Mr. Clover. Shelley's a comic. He makes jokes.
Shelley Sheldon. I've seen you.
Oh, you've lived. You don't have to talk to policemen if you don't want to, Ruth. I know a lawyer who says it's all right not to talk to a policeman.
You take advice from this comedian, Mrs. Houston?
What do you want to know?
Georgie was telling me about Otto, the acrobat. He said you could tell me more.
Sure, I can tell you a lot. 1, he was a beautiful man. 2, he made passes at me. 3, I loathed. Does that cover it, Mr. Clover?
Maybe. Why are you at the theater today?
I come down every day. I love vaudeville.
Maybe it's because I make you laugh, huh, Ruthie? Girl needs a man who makes her laugh. And I'm the best.
How did you feel about Otto, Mr. Sheldon?
Shelley, call me Shelley. Murder makes us all friends, doesn't it, Danny boy?
Let's keep it formal. My suspects usually call me Lieutenant.
Ah. Well, Lieutenant, I'll tell you about Otto. I hated his guts. He was egotistical, vain, selfish, arrogant, snobbish. He loved himself. No, the kind of a guy I mean.
It went like that. Vaudeville actors are just like any other people. They're scared. They're cooperative. They're uncooperative, depending upon their attitude toward policemen and their own conscience. The agile little dancer named Lee Emery was different. I interviewed him in his dressing room. It was like no interview I ever had before. Lee Emery danced through it, kind of weird, soft shoe ballet to the music of a battered phonograph. It was as if he were a grotesque puppet on strings, and the strings were dangled from some place of strangeness in his brain. I had to blink.
Does it bother you? My dancing, Lieutenant Clover?
Clover.
Clover.
Thanks. That's interesting music you're dancing to.
Interesting? Is it? That's interesting. Why is it interesting, Lieutenant?
It's the music you danced to on stage earlier.
Oh, I'm pleased. It struck you. You remember me as an artist.
Well, it was played in a different tempo, faster.
And now as a blues. Hey, watch. End of show, Lieutenant.
Yeah, you're a fine dancer, Emery.
Oh.
Tell me, why the different tempos to your music? Doesn't it throw your performance off?
Not at all. You see, I had a half a dozen records made of this music. All different rhythms. All different moods. Before each performance, I practice the one I shall do. Depends on my feeling at that moment.
Oh, you don't feel good now, huh?
Oh, Lieutenant, I'm in love with the world. Last night I took a walk in the Bowery. I talked with the poor, sodden fragments of humanity who people it. Now I am disenchanted. Next performance, my dancing will be a mirror of that feeling.
Oh, so the orchestra conductor will play your music as blues.
Uh-huh.
Must be a pleasure for him to work with someone as creative as you.
Thank you. Dancing, Lieutenant Clover, is an ultimate within itself. The antics, the grotesqueries of humankind distilled into classic, flawless expression. Now you say something philosophical, Lieutenant.
Yeah, try this. Did you have any reason to kill that acrobat?
But of course. As a performer, he was a bum. I wished him dead. From a purely artistic standpoint, of course. But you know what, Lieutenant?
Tell me.
I didn't kill him. I am a coward.
You have music for that, too?
But of course. Would you care to hear it?
I didn't care to. Emery looked at me sadly, bowed, and I made an exit. The next morning at headquarters, the reports came in. Ballistics said the bullet had been fired through a silencer on a .38 frame. It entered the acrobat's shoulders with a downward passage. The shot had come from backstage, from somewhere high in the wings where peeling sets of scenery hung. Coroner's report, death was instantaneous. The solution of murder almost never is. I thumbed Sergeant Tartaglia out of the way and took my turn under the fan.
That murder at the theater, Danny. A toughie, huh?
Yeah, I don't know. It's too early to tell.
Suspects? Any of them?
Goes like this, Sergeant. House manager Georgie Houston hated the acrobat because the acrobat made grand passes at his wife, Ruth.
Oh, jealousy's a good, sound, substantial motive, I always say. Yeah, I always say it's 100% motive.
The modest comic, Shelley Sheldon, he likes Ruth, too. Another 100% motive. Lieutenant Clover speaking.
Lieutenant, I told you.
Who is this?
Lee Emery. I told you I was a coward, Lieutenant.
So?
A man. He was standing across the street for the last hour.
What man? What are you talking about?
Listen to me. I don't know what man. He was watching the window of my room, and just a minute ago he walked into this hotel. Lieutenant.
Yeah, I'm listening.
Lieutenant, there's someone opening the door. Lieutenant!
Emery! You didn't need a cop's mind to put that shot and Emery's scream together. I thumbed through my notebook and got Emery's address. By the time I was downstairs, a squad car was waiting, its motor running. The siren channeled the street between headquarters and West 56th. It took 4 minutes to get there. Emery's room was 3 flights up and walked back. The room was empty. No Lee Emery, nothing. Correction. The room was filled with Emery's music coming from the phonograph. That, and a narrow streak of blood that wormed on the threadbare grass rug. But most of all, it was Emery's music. It was happy, real happy. I couldn't stand it. The room needed another quality. The quality that came after terror. A sigh, maybe, or silence. And I had the feeling Lee Emery had just bought himself a large piece of that.
You are listening to Broadway's My Beat with Larry Thor as Detective Danny Clover. One of the most successful dramas ever presented on the CBS Escape series will be repeated tonight. C.S. Montague's story entitled Action. The tale of a man who scales a mountain contemplating suicide and who finds a reason to live when he finally reaches the top. On Crime Photographer, you'll hear the fascinating tale of Durable Dennis, whose head was x-rayed to solve a $75,000 theft. In case someone tells you to get your head x-rayed, hear the story of Durable Dennis on Crime Photographer, as well as Action on the series Escape. They'll both be here just a little later tonight on most of these same CBS network stations. Now, back to Broadway's My Beat.
Broadway is a place that can get happy about a lot of things. A cat in a tree, a wrestler with curls who scents the ring with perfume, even by a swami who predicts the world is coming to an end by high noon tomorrow. Right now, the current happiness was touched off by a rumor that vaudeville was coming back. But I had proof positive that it was dying all over again. Item, a dead acrobat shot while opening the bill at the Dodge Theater. Item, a terrified hoofer named Lee Emery, who left only an afterimage of blood and music. Item, I had work to do. Work was routine. I called headquarters, told them to send out a missing person call on Emery, told them where I was going, and went. When I got backstage, the Dodge Theater was making ready to put on its false face for the first batch of customers. Ruth Houston was standing against a backdrop, considering the lighted end of a cigarette. When she saw me, she looked as if she could do without me.
Oh, hello, Lieutenant. You want to see me?
Does that make it any worse, Mrs. Houston?
Frankly, Lieutenant, there comes a time in every woman's life when she doesn't feel like talking to the police.
Now's the precise instant, huh?
It's like this, Lieutenant. I'm being sad. I'm being sad about a lot of things. Each one takes time.
Yeah, but I'm afraid I'll have to interrupt the emotion. What's making you sad, Mrs. Houston?
This whole thing will just wreck him. This thing of Otto's murder.
Wreck who?
My husband, Georgie. He had a good thing here at the Dodge. He was just going good.
You get sad about Otto?
I can do that, too. Otto thought he could beckon to a woman by flexing a bicep. He needed talking to. He didn't need killing.
Maybe making muscles wasn't the reason he was killed.
Your job to think like that, Lieutenant.
Tell me this, Mrs. Houston. How buddy were you with Lee Emery?
Him?
Him. Lee Emery.
What could Emery do for me, Dan?
Is he around now?
I haven't seen him. He hasn't shown up for the show.
You don't know where he is.
You took the words right out of my mouth. I wouldn't know where he is. I wouldn't want... Excuse me, Lieutenant.
Sure.
Hello? Hello? Yes? Yes, he's here. For you, Lieutenant, your office, or whatever you call your office.
Thanks. Clover speaking.
Danny, Tartaglia. We got him, kid. We got Lee Emery.
Yeah, where'd you find him?
East River Docks. Anyhow, that's where we fished him out. He's newly dead, Danny.
The wet gray heat had turned into a wet gray drizzle when I arrived at the East River dock. 3 hooded cops on horseback held back a crowd whose face looked like it had a veil drawn over it. And in between the foghorns and the boat whistles, you heard the soft whinny of a horse. You couldn't quite believe it. Then a splash of blue named Muggavan, harbor police, cut through the grayness. Him you had to believe.
Okay. Stand back now. Come on, Danny, hold my hand. I'll get you through this barrier of curious onlookers.
Thanks, Muggavan.
All right, out of the way, you. Out of the way now. Now, why don't you yokels get in out of the rain? Ain't you heard the song, It's Wet Outside?
That's a great act, Muggavan.
Danny, it builds. From hatred to love. The surly sneers of the mob become smiles of pleasure when I'm through molding their emotions.
When you get a chance, mold me a ham sandwich, Muggavan, on rye.
Huh? You mean right now?
No, not now. Now just tell me about him.
Well, it's like you see, Danny. First they shot him in the face, twice. From up close, then they threw him in the river.
How long did you say he was in the river?
Not long, Danny. Just long enough to wash him clean.
Yeah. Anything on him?
Yeah. This wallet and these papers, Social Security card issued to Lee Emery. Maryland driver's license made out to Lee Emery. Description, as stated, adds up to Lee Emery. Except for complexion and color of eyes. That, naturally, we can't tell. And this initial ring with the initials L.E., that spells Lee Emery.
Yeah, I've seen the ring. Do something for me, Muggavan.
Sure. You still want that sandwich, Danny?
Call headquarters for me. Have them pick up Georgie Houston, his wife, Ruth Houston, and a funny boy named Shelley Sheldon.
Sheldon?
He's very funny. I get a lot of my material from him.
Have them meet me at the morgue. I want them to identify a body.
This is a cold place you picked for me to play a matinee, Danny boy. How do I get yucks in the morgue?
I wouldn't know, comedian. You work it out.
You know, this hole reminds me of a theater I once played in Des Moines. Same type atmosphere, same type audience reaction. I was making with bombs, and those hasties just lay there like these stiffs.
Shut up, Shelley, shut up. Haven't you got any respect?
What's the matter, Georgie? The silent dead make you nervous?
No, Shelley, they bring me peace. That's why I give them respect.
Oh.
Danny, why did you bring us up here?
I want you to identify a body that was washed up in the East River.
Anybody we know?
That's a good question. Here we are.
Oh, the figure is familiar, but the face... What am I saying? What face?
What do you say, Georgie?
The suit. Yeah, I recognize the suit. It's exactly the same type suit Lee Emery wore every day of his life. He had them made in pairs. He always said if you found something that made you feel good, why change it? Is that Lee Emery, Danny?
Shelley, is this Lee Emery?
Yeah.
How do you know?
The shoes, they're a dancer shoe, soft shoe type shoes, the kind of shoes a dancer like Lee Emery wears when he's doing soft shoe type dancing. Do I make it clear, Danny boy?
Well, now, I lived without you. Do you recognize this ring?
Yeah, Danny. That's Lee's ring, all right. He hocked it with me once when he needed some dough.
All right. That's so.
You mean we can go now, Danny?
Yeah, you can go back to the theater, Georgie. They'll need you.
Now, wait a minute, Danny boy. It's not that easy. I've got a twist. I'd like to ask you some questions.
I thought you'd have some. I'll try to answer them, Mr. Sheldon.
Lee Emery, the boy in the box, he was murdered, huh?
We think so, Mr. Sheldon.
That means you suspect that maybe Georgie or me murdered him.
Could be, Mr. Sheldon.
This is the snapper, policeman. What makes me rate so high in your favor? There are others who were involved with Lee Emery.
Like who, Mr. Sheldon?
Like any of the other people at the Dodge Theater. Like Ruthie, the wife of Georgie.
Who are you, lousy
Take your
stinking
hand.
Hold it, Georgie. I'd like to answer, Mr. Sheldon. The cop, Mr. Sheldon, looks for motive. A good motive for killing the boy in there would be that he knew who killed Otto, the acrobat. That could be you, Georgie, or Ruth. By the way, Georgie, where is Ruth? I've been waiting for you to tell me why she isn't here.
Why, she was at the theater last time I saw her. Why?
She's not there anymore, Georgie. The boys upstairs tell me she's not anywhere. Maybe you can help the boys upstairs, Georgie.
Danny, you mean you can't find her? You mean the whole police department can't find her? Danny, you've got to find her. You've got to.
We will, Georgie. We will. Here you are, Sergeant. Send this call out over the intercom right away.
Yeah, Danny. Attention, all cars. Attention, all cars. 3:25 p.m. Pick up Ruth Houston. Ruth Houston. She is 5 feet 4 inches tall. Weight, about 121. She has black hair. Black hair. Dark brown eyes. Attractive. May be in the company of a man. May be carrying suitcase. Check bus, rail, and plane terminals. Urgent.
Get the squad car moving, Joe. Grand Central.
Yeah.
Patrolman Michikov calling precinct headquarters at 3:45 p.m. Nothing to... Huh? Yeah. 5'4", 121, black hair. Yeah, I got it.
But, officer, that was a green light I just went through. I'm sure that was a green light.
Yeah, I know. Okay, you can go.
I don't understand. Now you say I can go. Why?
Because your eyes aren't brown.
Tartaglia speaking. Yeah? Good. 14th Street Precinct, right away. They got her, Danny. Holding her at the 14th Street Precinct.
Let's go. Hello, officer. Where is she?
In there with the matron.
Nice work, fellow.
There she is, Danny.
You can go home, miss. You're not the right Ruth Houston. Lieutenant Clover speaking.
Danny? Muggavan, Harbor Police.
Yeah?
We got something hot. Something directly from the laps of the gods.
Don't make a production out of it, Muggavan. Just tell me what it is.
Ruth Houston. Does the name bring a smile to your lips, Danny?
Come on, Muggavan. What's the story?
As follows. I was in a coffee joint on the pier, like I always am at 9 p.m., so I can talk to my friend Marty Udenfreud, the cab driver whom I befriended. We talked, and routinely I tell him this description of one Ruth Houston. Okay so far, Danny?
Muggavan, the nights are long and lonely in Flatbush. What about Ruth Houston?
Well, Marty has her for a fare about 7:30. Takes her to a pier on the Hudson River.
How did he know she was Ruth Houston?
Oh, she was a looker. The description tallies, and the initials on her suitcase was R.H.
Go on.
Then she gets on a boat. The good ship Christina, a freighter.
Great. Hold that boat, Muggavan. Don't let it move.
I hope you have good reason to delay the voyage of the Christina. What can we do for you, Lieutenant?
Now, just tell me where to find the girl who looks like this picture. Show it to him, Muggavan.
Here she is, Captain. A princess.
Yeah, she's here. She and her husband.
Husband.
Oh, your face looks like it is perhaps not her husband.
When did he get on board?
It was very romantic. He boarded the Christina hours before we sailed, locked himself in the cabin, and waited for his young girl. Romantic, yeah?
Yeah. Where's the cabin, Captain?
I will show you.
Just tell us. We want to meet them alone.
It is down the end of this long passageway, the door on your left.
Let's go, Muggavan.
Who is it?
It's Danny Clover, Mrs. Houston. Open up. Open up.
Get back! Get back! Yeah.
Looks like the little lady don't want to see us. Looks like I'll have to open the door from this side. I think now it's okay for us to enter, Danny.
Yeah.
I hurt her, Danny.
Let me see. It's not too bad. Go get the captain. He'll know what to do.
Yeah.
I wasn't wrong. Phonograph and some records. All right, Emery. Come out. I know you're here.
Sure, Lieutenant Clover. I was coming anyway. That music attracts me.
I thought it would. You okay?
Sure. I ducked into the washroom when you started shooting back. Ruth's hurt, though, isn't she?
Yeah. I'll take your gun.
Here. You're clever, Lieutenant Clover. You're an artist.
Only because you made a mistake.
Play me my mistake.
You shot that man's face away. It leaves more than just that trickle of blood you arranged in your room. But you know about things like that, Emery. Who was he?
He was nothing. An absolute nothing. A zero. An empty circle.
I knew you'd figure it that way. You told me you walked the Bowery for art. You walked it to find a derelict who was the same size, the same build as you. That was his only use, you figured. So you used him. You killed him. You thought I'd believe you were dead.
That leaves Otto, the acrobat. Why should I kill a useful man like Otto?
Ruth's being here tells me that, Emery. Otto liked her, too. Competition from a man like Otto frightens two lovers like you. So you killed him.
But of course. I said you were an artist. Now, if you'll pardon me, Lieutenant Clover.
I didn't stop him. It needed a touch like that. Emery's dancing to a dirge. This time he danced as if the puppet strings from his brain had been cut away and the madness was complete. When Muggavan came back with the captain, they stopped in the splintered doorway and stood there. Just stood there. But in a little while, the dance was over. There's no fury on Broadway now. It's dawn. The angry avenues of the night are still. But in a few hours, it'll renew itself, the bang and the clatter and the rack and roar and the voice. Because it's Broadway, the gaudiest, the most violent, the lonesomest mile in the world. Broadway, my beat.
Broadway's My Beat, with Larry Thor as Detective Danny Clover, is produced and directed by Gordon T. Hughes, with script by Morton Fine and David Friedkin. Musical direction is by Lud Gluskin. Be sure to join us again next week, same time, same station, for Broadway's My Beat. It's a sealed room mystery, a favorite of detection connoisseurs on Mr. Keene tonight. The victim, a wealthy book publisher. The sealed room, an air-conditioned, windowless library bolted on the inside. Mr. Keene's latest case, Murder in the Bolted Room, will be along not very many minutes from now on most of these same CBS stations. This is CBS, the Columbia Broadcasting System.
Welcome back. A very solid case, and I was surprised by the solution. I suspected the comedian. Early press notices for the New York version of Broadway's My Beat teased the idea of being a mystery series that would tie into the theater. That sort of series would not be really practical or realistic, since there's far more to that area than the theatrical area, but you can definitely get some cases set there, and this was such a setting. Also, we got to meet two key supporting characters in this Hollywood run, in Sergeant Gino Tartaglia, played by Charles Calvert, and Sergeant Muggavan, played by Jack Kruschen. Neither character is really developed or fleshed out in this episode, but introducing them this early does show the creative direction plan for the series and establish their place in it. Alright, well, listener comments and feedback now, and we'll start over on Facebook. And Joey writes, I agree, Adam, this story would not play out this way in real life. However, it didn't stop me from getting a tear in my eye. Very emotional. And then Greg writes, this was an excellent episode over on Instagram. Well, thanks for the comments. I'm kind of questioning myself whether I was a little too hard on that episode. I do think that as I have gotten a bit older, I've come to appreciate some things which may not be realistic, but speak to some very real things in the human experience. I think I do have a bit of a genre expectation. Like, if I listen to this episode on something like, say, the Silver Theater, I might have been able to get more into it. It's a bit harder when you've got a genre like a detective program. There are certain expectations you need to meet, and it can be done. Recently on Yours Truly, Johnny Dollar, we played an episode called The Rasmussen Matter, which I think really spoke to some of these same beats. But I think there was a little bit more grounding in realism and a bit more detective work that played out. And when I do think of that New York version, probably one of the big challenges with it is that the stories did vary so greatly. Even the 4 episodes we have, really the feel of them and what type of story they were had some variance. I think that when people tune into a regular program, and I think particularly in this era, they're going to be like, okay, what type of program am I going to get? Am I going to get a sort of mystery program where the police solve a murder? Or am I going to get a drama program that's centered around a cop and has him interacting with sort of personal issues? Or am I going to have something that's entirely different? And I think even in the 4 episodes we heard, the New York Broadway's My Beat didn't really pick a lane. And once you've kind of established by default what the series is going to be like and people's expectations have been set, you can every now and again go with something a little bit different. As long as it's good, as long as you don't do it too often and you don't test the audience's patience. Casey Crime Photographer did that because you had some episodes that were a little more sentimental, even during the Anchor Hawking run. And maybe that was one of the challenges for John Dietz. He was kind of used to a situation where you could, mix things up a bit. But in your first 14 weeks of a series, you really have to give the audience an idea, okay, what is this thing going to be about? And thinking about that may have been the challenge. And what kind of threw me about that episode more than anything else. And then over on YouTube, we have a comment from Lori regarding the Rita Rondell murder case. New to me, thank you. Well, thank you, Lori. And then Dino commented regarding the Rita Rondell murder case. Clover asked how the lady knew the pigeon was married. In addition to the setup, how about a wedding band? Well, thanks so much. Well, I hope he was wearing a wedding band. It wasn't like that thing on Mr. Chameleon a few weeks back with pierced ears. People in the 1940s definitely wore wedding bands, although some, then and now may not have been able to afford them or have some particular religious belief, but he could definitely afford a wedding ring if you're going to a convention in New York City, and there was no indication of some sort of religious belief that would be contrary to a wedding ring. I do think that the New York series did lean more into emotional, personal clues, and so may not have thought of that more obvious physical clue. And then we have a new listener survey, this one coming from Jake in Toronto, who writes, great overall, great analysis and reviews, the best of the best hosts, thank you for all the shows, forget about the naysayers. The research shared with us is outstanding, as is your commitment to bringing high quality content to the listeners. Well, thanks so much, Jake, I appreciate the encouragement, and you can never, ever, ever let those sort of people govern what you do. One thing I've come to accept is that this show is not for everyone. It's not even for everyone who enjoys old-time radio. That doesn't mean that you never consider any criticism, but I only really consider criticism from folks who actually get what we're doing here. If you don't want commentary in front of your old-time radio programs, or you find my voice utterly insufferable, or you question my motives or whatever, the most you can do is irritate me for a moment, but it's not going to change how we do things. But over the years, of course, we've gotten some great feedback and made some changes based on things we heard from our listeners. But thank you so much. Once again, appreciate the comment. Now it is time to thank our Patreon supporter of the day, and I want to thank Marla. Marla has been one of our Patreon supporters since January 2018, currently supporting the podcast at the Seamus level of $4 or more per month. Thank you so much for your support, Marla. And that will actually do it for today. If you're enjoying the podcast, please follow us using your favorite podcast software. And if you're enjoying the podcast on YouTube, be sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and mark the notification bell. We'll be back next Wednesday with another episode of Broadway's My Beat. But join us back here tomorrow for Mr. Chameleon, where...
She was killed with an old-fashioned razor. Mr. Marley, who in this house uses an old-fashioned razor?
Why, my cousin, Clifford Haddon, Venda's husband, but he was mad about her.
I'd say madness had a great deal to do with it. It was that kind of murder. Did you say your cousin?
Yes, Mr. Chameleon. I was just visiting here. My home is in Connecticut.
I see. Does your cousin Clifford have any children?
Well, no, not exactly. Of course, there's Annette, but she's a stepdaughter.
You mean that she's the dead woman's daughter?
No. Annette was Venda's stepdaughter. The daughter of Venda's first husband, Arnold Phillips, who died.
I see. The house was full of relatives. The husband's cousin, the murdered wife's stepdaughter. Where is your cousin, Clifford Haddon?
In his room, Mr. Chameleon, suffering from shock. It was he who discovered his wife's dead body.
Mm-hmm. I don't wonder he's suffering from shock, but I must talk to him.
I hope you'll be with us then. In the meantime, send your comments to box13@greatdetectives.net. Follow us on Twitter @Radio Detectives and check us out on Instagram, instagram.com/Great Detectives. From Boise, Idaho, this is your host, Adam Graham, signing off.